Let's start by opening an instance of EasyBuilder Pro. To create a new project, of course, we want to select the New Radio button. Click OK. Today we're using my personal favorite, by the way, the cMT3090 in landscape mode, and we're using a project template, which means there are some pre-made pages that we can use. First step we need to do is define our PLC that we're going to use. So I'll click New PLC. And as you can see, we have a tremendous number of drivers. I could add a Rockwell driver or one of the many others. But for today's project, we're going to use one of our Weintek PLCs. And we're going to use an Ethernet protocol. Go ahead and set our IP address here. Now, by default, EasyBuilder Pro makes one page for you. That's Windows 10. And also by default, it is our startup window, and in Systems Parameters under the General tab, the startup screen is defined. So we're going to keep it Windows 10 for our project today, but I don't like just Windows 10, so we're going to go ahead and right click and select Settings, and we'll call this Startup. So now when we run our project, by default this page will be the first page we see. Now at some point we need to go ahead and save and name our project. So we can either go under the File tab and click Save or Save As, or the first time we compile we will be prompted to go ahead and save. So I'm gonna initiate an online simulation, and you see this asks me to go ahead and save it. I've got a file on my desktop called Project Images, so I'm just going to save it there for now, and the default name given is EBProject1, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it that for our purposes. Click Save. And there's a project. As you can see, there's really nothing here. Can't do anything. Just a blank page. But our project is saved, and we can move on to our next step. So at this point, we can go ahead and create a new page. So we're going to go down to position 11. Click New. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Home. And I can go ahead and double click our home page, and here it is. So I'm going to start out by adding a ASCII input object. And under the General tab here, you see we can select Allow Input, Multi-line Display, and set up our alignment and so on and so forth. But for this purposes, we only need one line. and I want to read a local address, and I'm going to go into settings here, and I want to use a systems tag. And I'm going to select the project name systems tag. You can see it's 14 words long. The address is internal register LW9100. I'm going to select that, and of course I'm going to make the length 14 words. Click OK. OK. And I really don't like that background, so I'm going to open it back up here and go into the Shape tab and just select no picture or shape right now. So we just have text right there. I'm going to go over a couple of these toolbars for ASCII or text data. We've got our text toolbar up here, and we can go ahead and change the font if we wanted and the size. So those are just quick ways of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and just make another object that we can write to, and I'm going to use a retentive local register, and that's going to be RW0, and I'll just leave it at 14 words. So we can enter any text we want in there, and it will be stored in a retentive register. Alright, so let's move on. We're going to go ahead and create a static text object, and I'll explain why in just a moment, but I'm going to type in here index. Now I want to create a numeric object, and in this case I'm going to deselect allow input because I just want to display a value. I'm going to use a local register, and I'm going to use 9200. Now the reason I use 9200 is we have a function called index registers that's built into our PLC, and you'll see here I can actually select index register and so on and so forth, and I'll explain to you in just a moment how all that works. For example, I'm going to add another numeric object. I'm going to allow input, and I'm going to use register RW20. I'm going to select index register, and starting point is going to be index 0. Copy and paste that, and I'm going to select register 30, copy and paste, select register 40. Now the reason for this is this is a very simple way to store recipe data in local registers of the PLC. Okay, our R registers or RWA are all retentive, so even through a power cycle the data will remain. So, for example, index 0 represents RW20, index 1 would represent RW21, index 2 RW22, so on and so forth. So if we've got a so in this example here I created room for 10 data points for each one of these displays in our recipe. So in index 1 this will show, or in index 0 this will show the value of RW0 or 20. In index 0 this will show RW30 and this will display RW40. Index 1 will display RW21, RW31, RW41, so on and so forth. Go ahead and straighten this stuff up a little bit. Before we can do an offline simulation, we need a way to navigate to our home screen. And I'll come back to this, but for now I'm just going to put a, this is called a function key. This is a pretty versatile tool. You can do quite a few things with this, but we're going to use it to change full screen, and we're going to go to our home screen. So I'm just going to put a simple button right there. So we'll go ahead and run our online or offline rather simulation. Navigate to our home screen. Now, this is an offline simulation, so there's actually data stored on my local PC, data that the simulation engine uses. So as you can see here in index 0 I've got a value of 900, 1000, and 1000. I'll go ahead and change this to 2000. And so if I go to index 1, you can see my values change. Edit that to 400 just to show you. Go to index 3, so on and so forth. Go back to 2. Go back to 1. 0. So that's how that works. Now you might ask yourself, okay, that's great, but how are we going to get that data from our recipe area, from our local register into our PLC? Well, we go under Objects tab here, and we want to look for data transfer, and we're going to do a trigger-based data transfer, which basically just means we can define what the trigger is. In this case we're going to use a touch trigger, which is a push button, or I could use an external trigger, which could be a bit from the from a local bit or from the PLC. But we're going to go with the touch trigger, and we want to write data from RW20 index, 16-bit index, and we want to write to our PLC to register R0. Length of 1 word. No security under this, on this, and we'll just use a, tell you what, let's use a shape. give it a little bit of character here. Give it some colors. And we'll put some text in here. So when I click this button, I should move this value into RW0. Let me go ahead and put a, PLC register R0. Take that index register off of there. So now we can see what our value is there. I am coincidentally connected to a Weintek PLC, so I can go ahead and do an online simulation. And as you can see, it will write the data from our stored area to our PLC register. You can see our ASCII display object is showing our project name up here at the top of the page. I can click on our other one that we made and enter anything I want in there. Put my name. So, good stuff. Alright, so what I've done later on in the video, we're going to log some data, and we'll also display that data on a trend display. So what I've done is, in our PLC, I've built a little ramp function, and these registers that we're writing to actually will define a profile for our ramp function block. So what we've done is we've created a recipe. So we've got a database of 10 different recipes that are stored in local registers within our HMI, and I can feed those profiles to the PLC to create different ramp profiles that we can then display in a chart. So I'm going to go ahead and do some quick copy and paste work here to go ahead and complete this. Just bear with me. Pretty sure I've got my PLC registers correct. Have to go back and check. Now we do have these neat little alignment tools and stuff that we can use here. So I'll go ahead and put these in a straight line, and put these in a straight line, and I'll put our top row in a straight line vertically, our bottom row in a straight line vertically, and then I'll equalize the spacing, the vertical spacing. At this point, let's go ahead and add a little more interesting way to shift through or index registers. I'm going to go ahead and just move these down here a little bit. And since we got those all lined up, I'm going to go ahead and group them. And then go ahead and group that. Show you a little trick here. And line those up. Since they're grouped, we can use our vertical alignment tool. Get them lined right up there. So I'm going to give a little more space here between these two. And I'm going to go ahead and add what we call a word set object. And I'm going to write to our 9200 register. Now you can do a few different things with the word set object. Of course, you can write a constant value, but in this case we're going to use this to jog down with a bottom limit of 0 and a decrement value of 1. And let's hunt down a interesting shape to use here. We've got some simple icons here. I think got some arrows. So we'll use an arrow. Or you know what? We could actually use a. Yeah, let's use a minus. Just gonna, for simplicity's sake, copy and paste it. Put it here. And then, of course, we're going to change this to jog up with an upper limit of 9. 0 to 9 would be our 10 registers. The increment value of 1. Oh yeah, and our shape. And use our plus. Go ahead and make that a little smaller. Line these up a little. Now I want to do something here too. I need to make these sign value here, and we didn't really go into those. So let's find, I think it's under format. I'm going to go ahead and change this to 16-bit sign. Under the format tab, and we'll go into a little bit more of this later, you can set up scaling and also dynamic limits. You can use display format, where I can actually type a value here. I think this would be low limit. Make these a little smaller actually. I'll select all of these. will be high limit, also signed. This is going to be the ramp time. It needs to remain unsigned. All right, so now that implies that text in there. You can also use that to imply a decimal point if you wanted to. When you use this, you just need to make sure that you have enough digits in here. Now, if you didn't use that, then you could define what's left and right of the decimal point that way. It's kind of nice, it remembers the settings. So, alright, good to, oh, I wanted to take that out, decimal point. Alright, so there we have that. Let's move on to some data logging. Within our ramp function, the actual ramp value is stored in register D0. So I'm going to go to data logging, object tab, data logging, and data sampling. I'm going to click new. Now on comments, that's actually the sample name, so we're going to call this ramp value. That'll work. And we're going to take a sample about every half second. Now I could do trigger based, and I could define a PLC address, a bit address to trigger it by, or a internal bit, a internal HMI bit, but we're going to stick with the time based. And our read address is going to be our Weintek PLC register D0. Now we have to define the format of the sample that we're taking. You can actually define multiple samples, but they do have to be sequential. In other words, if I had two 16-bit samples, that would use D0 and D1. If I had a 16-bit and a 32-bit sample, it would use D0, D1, and D2. For this example, we're going to go ahead and add our current, we'll call it current ramp value, and it is going to be a 16-bit signed value, and we just click OK. If we wanted to add another one, we could. And as you can see, it displays we're using 3 words, but we don't need that one, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete it out of there. And we're back to the length of 1. We can enable history files. This will store up to this limit, we can define the sync destination, either our local memory or the USB disk or an inserted SD card. We can name the name of the log. We can call this the, of course, ramp valve log. We can actually customize that file name. At this point, it will save a record every 24 hours, and it will preserve 7 days worth. We could do customized file handling, and we can do a couple things with the way we set this up. This will add a date format to the actual log file name. So if we a good way to look at it is your lowest resolution. If you had it down to the second, it would save a new file every second. If you had it down to the minute, it would save it down to the minute. Hour, it would save it hourly. If you had day, it would do daily, so on and so forth. Whatever the lowest resolution, it will add to it. So let's say we want the day. So let me go ahead and clear that out completely, and we'll add the day, month, and full year. Click OK. So down here is an example of what the log would look like. So there you go. We can, and if you'll notice, it changed this from days to files now. So we can define how many files we want to save. Since we're saving one every day, and let's say we wanted to save a month's worth, we would do 30 files. Simple enough. Exit. So I showed you one way to make a new page, so I'm going to show you another. I'm going to show you how to import a page. So what we want to do is go to Edit and Window Process and Window Copy. Now, automatically this field is populated with our local file project, but we can go to another project if we wanted to. I actually have one here, I think. Do this. Now this is from a completely different PLC, so I want to copy page 12 and 13, I believe, from that project. And my destination is going to be window 12, starting destination. So that should replace it with page 12 and 13. And as you can see, that imported page 12 and 13, the trend and bit page. Now, if you'll notice, I can also get into the attributes by right-clicking, and if you'll notice the standard size, 1024 by 768. On these pages. The ones we imported were from a different PLC that actually had a smaller screen. So since we just imported the screens and didn't convert the project, it kept the original size, but that's okay because we're going to actually navigate to those as a pop-up. So we're going to do another function key, and we're going to go to the trend, and we're gonna do the display pop-up window radio button. And if you'll notice, after I did that, the animation setting button is now available. So you can click on it, and we can define the effects for the pop-up window. We can fade, fly, float. So let's do float, and let's make it kind of long. We'll do, say, 250 milliseconds. And we come in from the left, and we're gonna fly, say 300 milliseconds to the right. Go ahead and put a label on this, and we'll trend. Okay, I did want to show you these tabs here. We've got our shape library tab, and so we can actually go through our different libraries and change them right there from that. So just wanted to show you that. Over here, by the way, we also do have our address grid. It will show us the addresses that are used in the project by displaying them in red. These are our local HMI RW registers. There's the LWs. Not using any till way up here. Can also look at the used PLC addresses in our HMI project. So, and you're familiar with the window tab. We also have, like I said, our libraries, our shape libraries, so on and so forth. So, handy little tool that's there. So anyways, let's go ahead and run an online simulation and look at everything we've done so far. As you can see, it retained that value that we entered in there. Our increment buttons. We'll cycle through our recipe. We'll go all the way up to 9 and all the way down to 0. We hit our trend key, and it displays our pop-up window. These values here are based on the limits that we entered, supposedly. And it's as simple as that. I can dynamically change this limit here. It's a little longer. And as simple as that. So let's go on over here to our trend page and look at our actual display object. This is a what we call a trend display. This little icon up here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click the one I made here, and of course we're looking at our ramp value, our data log, data sample from there. Our axis range, I've got 120 seconds worth, that's 2 minutes worth. Watch line, what that is, you can actually define an address. I'm going to use LW0, and then anywhere you click on the display, it will actually place the value of the sample at that slice in time into that address. Here's where you defined your grid and your frame and your timestamp and so on and so forth. The channel tab, let's say we had several different ones within that sample, as I showed you before. We could check whether or not to display them in this trend. Down here are our pen properties. We can define the width and the color of the pen. I've chosen dynamic limits. Here we're reading, if you'll remember correctly, this was our low limit value, which is 1. And of course our high limit, they would be sequential, so our high limit on our trend is also our high limit on our ramp function. So that's how I define those. I could always just do static limits, and we could define what they were, so on and so forth. Over here on the axis, you can define whether there is where there's an actual legend and which one it is based off of. So we're going to do the main axis and of course this sample because it's the only one we have. And that's all there is to that. Here on this page, of course, I'm displaying these values. And of course I also put a navigation button to get back home. I also added a page I called bit page. Now I did something pretty cool here. If you'll notice, we've got a state tool here, and we can actually cycle through the states of our objects. So if I go to state 1, you'll notice that I put some bit lamps here, and I strategically placed them in behind an image that I imported of a rung from the PLC. And then of course I made push buttons and a bit lamp that relate to these objects here. So let's go ahead and do an online simulation and see how that works. up if I put a navigation button to that. You can also use the text alignment tool on these type things. Alright, now we're ready. Isn't that cool? I'll show you how I made this object right here. Here I just have a simple picture object. Here's the icon for a picture, and place it in here, and then in my picture library under the project tab, I simply added a new picture, whichever one's highlighted in yellow you're working on. So I've got a new one highlighted here. So I'm going to click new. As you can see, there's no images here. So I'm going to click new, and I've got this bitmap image that I made earlier. I just copied, did a screenshot of the PLC code and opened up Paintbrush and made a simple picture. Now when we import these type of images, we can actually define a transparency. So here I'm using white, the background color, so all we see is the actual rung itself. And there you have it. So now it's transparent. In behind there, I just use simple bit lamps. Address to Y0 there, naturally. And the shape, I just used a simple shape. I made the first state a transparency. You can do that with this little tool here. And the second state is simply a red block. Change that back right so that you can see it better. So pretty cool little way to create and add your own graphics. One thing I haven't showed you yet, another staple, is a bit lamp. I'm sorry, a word lamp. Since we've already got stuff set up to change that value, we'll just do our 9200. And we're going to do about 5 or 6 states. Do 5. Go to our shape tab, picture library. Remember, you always got to go under the project tab. We'll click new, new object. And let's see, I'll just bring in these little funny faces here. Now I can also change the position of each image to move them around like so. I'll show you another little trick you can do with our actual screen background. Go into custom, use the selection tool. Pretty cool, huh? So let's go ahead and do it online. And you can see as we cycle through the different images change in our word length. Now, some other things we can do with in our page properties. Let me go ahead and add a page here. I'm going to call it back for a background page. Go ahead and open it up, and I'm going to import a picture. A new one here. Put my logo there on this one. Put it right here up in this corner. And then we can go to our home page. We can actually define underlay windows up to 3 layers that are layered in conjunction with the actual native window. So on our bottom layer here, I want to put back 1, and you'll see that shows there now. And I can even go in here and do that same little trick. And the rest of the screen matches the background on the logo. So yeah, and you can actually do multiples. So let's add put this back too. When you create a new window, it retains the same property as the window you just created, which I actually could have used that image, but yes. Go ahead and make a new one here. Run a simulation. we go. So I'm going to go ahead while we're at it. We'll go ahead and dress up our start page. Take our button. We could make it transparent. Oops. We could make it transparent and cover the whole page. And then let's make another background. Here to center them up. And one more try. As you can see, I can touch anywhere on the screen, navigate here, a bit pop up. So there you have it. Thank you for watching, and be sure to come back and watch some more of our how-to videos.